Hi everyone, I'm really excited to be here and talk about perseverance and talk about what it is and how we might instill it in our students. I'm going to talk a little bit about the research in this area, talk about how it applies to us, to law professors, and then talk about an experiment I've done in my classroom this term, attempting to teach this important skill. So first of all, what is perseverance? It is tenacity. It is determination. It is identifying some long-term goal, working hard to reach it, right? It is working hard toward that goal even if you face failures, setbacks, plateaus in progress along the way. The example that comes up, if you were to Google such a thing, is Stephen King. Stephen King apparently sent his first novel to about 60 different publishers and was rejected by about 60 different publishers, right? And his novel was called Carrie. And eventually a publisher said yes, right? He didn't give up, he kept going, he persevered. So that's what I'm talking about today. So this is a picture of some very gritty dirt because perseverance is also identified as grit or resilience. Right? These are some of the terms that researchers are using. This is an area of a lot of research in recent years. And there's some good reasons for that, right? Perseverance has been identified as a predictor of success, okay? There's some non-cognitive qualities such as perseverance, self-confidence, integration toward goals that have been identified as potential predictors of success and achievement. U.S. Department of Education has recommended that schools start teaching these skills to students, right? They call them academic tenacity, academic perseverance. Okay, so there's a real sort of movement in this direction. And so researchers are asking, can adults learn this, right? Can people who've grown up their whole lives, perhaps not oriented toward long-term goals, who really have struggled with that hard work, failure thing, right? Who've struggled with that, and as adults, can they learn these skills? If they can learn them, how? And pertinent to us, if they can learn them and we figure out how, can we do it in 3 years in law school? And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the research here before I go into talking about my own experiment. Carol Dweck has done some interesting research on mindset. She's identified these two mindsets. One is called fixed, one is called growth. The person with a fixed mindset essentially believes that he or she is born with all they're ever going to have, right? They can't increase their intelligence. They can't really learn new skills and abilities. This is the person who says, I'll never learn to play the piano. I don't have the music gene, right? Or I'll never be an artist. Or I'll never be an athlete, right? I just don't have it in me. So that's the fixed mindset. And as you can imagine, it's somewhat disempowering. How much are you really going to work toward improving yourself or learning new skills or learning new abilities if you just don't think it's ever going to be successful? So it's a very disempowering, it's a learned helplessness sort of mindset. The alternative is a growth mindset. A person with a growth mindset believes that he or she can get smarter, they can learn new skills, and they can add abilities to their tool set through hard work, through practice, through learning. Okay, so they're very different. And so you can imagine, again, that the person with a growth mindset is very empowered. If you think you're ultimately going to be successful, right? If I enroll in nursing school and I know that over the next several years I'm just going to practice and work hard and you know, despite my really, really real fear of blood, I can somehow get through this, right? Then, you know, that's very empowering. I'm going to work hard. I'm empowered to succeed. So there's a relationship here between mindset and perseverance, right? A growth mindset, a person with that mindset, is inspired to persevere, inspired to keep going, okay? And so here's a quote on this idea of perseverance from Angela Duckworth, who's another researcher. The grittiest individuals place high value on challenging goals, put low estimates on the costs of working toward these goals, and hold expectations that these goals are feasible. Crucially, they continue to maintain high expected valuations for their goals, despite failures, setbacks, and other kinds of adversity. So that's what we're talking about. So we've got these two mindsets. We've got one that empowers and one that disempowers. And we might think about it as a difference between, I can't draw, and that's a shame that nobody taught you. This example really resonates with me because I'm a lawyer in a family of artists. And so I really quite literally said this for most of my life. I can't draw. Please give it to someone else. I even married an artist, right? I'm a glutton for punishment. And I then, about 8 or 10 years ago, I took a drawing class. And I got to tell you, I killed it. I made these beautiful drawings of lemons, cloves of garlic. I mean, it was amazing. It was eye-opening because, and here's what I did, right? I took a class with a very good teacher. I had to show up X number of hours per week over the course of, several months. I had to sit there during that time period, and I had to practice, right? And I had to keep doing it and doing it. And in the beginning, it wasn't very good. It was lacking a little bit of shape. And then toward the end, right, it got better and better and better and better. And so that was that process. And art and music typically are areas where perseverance pays off in particular. They're areas where you can sort of embrace these long-term goals and really get into it and really see some of this change. So how can we encourage our students to develop a growth mindset, develop this belief in themselves that if they persevere, if they work hard, they can achieve, right? I know that you guys have heard, I can't write, I can't do multiple choice, I'm a terrible public speaker, right? These are the comments I get from students all the time. And so one of the things you want to try to do is challenge that. So that's an example, right? So saying, I can't write. That's an example of a fixed mindset. That person believes that they were not born with that writing gene, right? I was born, I wasn't a good writer, I just can't do it, right? I don't think I'll ever learn it. Maybe I'll get to be okay, but I'll never be good. And so one of the things that research shows you can do is just challenge that mindset, right? You can say, that's a shame that nobody ever taught you how to write. What have you done? When's the last time you practiced, right? What was the last thing you wrote? Did you rewrite it? How many times, right? Start to challenge that belief system. Start to challenge that innate belief that I can't do this, right? I don't have this. We can also model perseverance and growth mindset in our classroom, right? So we can give stories of our own failures, right? I'm sure I have a few, right? And my students know about them. Whatever it is, failures in personal life, failures in your career, failures in the courtroom or in law school, right? Everyone has them, and yet you keep going, right? And so you can model that by talking to students about that. We can also encourage students to try different strategies when they fail, right? One of my favorite sayings in the world is that there are a million ways to be a good parent. I'm a parent. It's really reassuring to hear that because it's a hard job. And so I believe that there are a million different ways to be a good lawyer, to be a good law student, to be a good law professor, right? There's not just this one way. And I often think students are, they think they're, we know, right? They think there's that right answer. They think there's just that one way and there's a secret, and if they figure it out, it's all going to become clear. And so I think a lot of encouraging perseverance is, no, that didn't work, but keep going, right? Try something else. There's other opportunities. There's other ways to be good at this. We can identify specific errors. So you can imagine that saying, this paragraph isn't working, is different from saying, these are the 3 things you need to fix in this paragraph in order for it to be good, right? Or in order for it to be successful, right? On one hand, you're telling the student, not working, not good, this is a fail, right? On the other hand, you're giving them really specific ideas. They can recognize, these are errors I made. I can fix errors. And so it's a different way of looking at giving feedback. And finally, we can encourage our students to be risk takers. What's the worst that can happen? Well, they fail. Well, if failure is not the end point, that's okay. If failure is a midpoint on that road to the end, then the failure is okay. And in fact, it's a learning experience, right? So in terms of what I did in my classroom, I assigned, so this is a second semester writing course, and we do persuasive writing. So I assigned my students a case file. It was a Sixth Amendment speedy trial issue. And I had them write a motion to dismiss or a response to motion to dismiss in chunks. And so the first chunk was they had to write the contentions and rules. They turned that in. I gave it back to them with very specific, very detailed feedback. Then they had to rewrite it. They rewrote that, and they added in the explanation. I gave that back to them with very specific, detailed feedback. Then they had to rewrite the contentions and rules again, rewrite the explanation, add in the application and conclusion, and so on. So over the course of maybe 6 weeks, I would say, they were rewriting and reworking on this same material over and over and over again. And some of my goals for this project were, one was I wanted to create good habits in the sense that I've noticed in past classes that although professors give students a lot of feedback, I'm not sure students always read it, right? And if they did read it, they didn't integrate it into new work, right? And so it kind of was left back there somewhere, and they didn't understand how it applied to their future work. And so I really wanted them to not just read my feedback, but think about it, ask questions about it, and then actually apply it, right? Actually put it into their new versions of this assignment. So that was one goal. Another goal was giving them specific tasks to complete in order to see improvement, right? So I was very cognizant of how I worded my feedback. Instead of saying, this doesn't make any sense, or, this is a run-on, I tried to give more specific feedback, like maybe breaking this into 2 sentences would make it more manageable, right? I wanted to create a disincentive for learned helplessness. So because this was a rewrite project, if they turned in something pretty bad, they were going to have to redo it, and they knew that, right? And so the idea here was make it as good as possible. You may limit your rewrites in the future, right? Don't just turn in your draft and then move on, right? Make it really good. And then finally, I just wanted to see real concrete improvement over the course of the class. It's a little frustrating sometimes to spend 4 months in a class and not feel like you're seeing huge improvement, right? Because a lot of students, frankly, need huge improvement over the course of that term. Challenges, it's a lot of time. It's the grading, right? It's always the big challenge, and it took a lot of time to do all this grading and all this feedback. So in terms of the results, the student feedback was remarkably positive. What I kept hearing was, I know I can do better, right? Every time they turned in a draft, I can do better. I took it, I just can't wait to get more feedback because I know what I need to do. Or this has never really happened to me before, but several instances, students turned in the paper, and we'd have sort of a class discussion about it, and kind of check in and what happened, and we'd kind of talk about it. And then by the end of the class, I had students coming up and saying, I just figured out what else I need to do. Can I turn it in again, right? Can I give you a new version, right? There was this really invested interest in redoing it, making it good, turning it in, right? Getting that feedback, and they were really invested in that process. In terms of improvement, I thought that they did, frankly. I was really happy to see that they improved. I had probably the most struggling project, the student who struggled the most on the project, who the initial version was, not the right law, not the right cases, not the right rules. I mean, really just not there. Ended up with a product that was infinitely closer to where it should be, right? I mean, it went from being an F, clearly, to being probably, I would say, B or C, right? And so I saw quite a bit of improvement in that process. And, the students get to understand more about, one thing we always say is they don't know what they don't know. And so in that process, they got to understand their lack a little bit, right? Like, here's this concept that I just don't get, and she keeps telling me over and over and over again that I need to fix it. Let me go figure out what it is, right? What am I doing wrong? Let me go actually ask that question. So what I hope they got out of it is that every one of them has the ability and the capacity to be a good writer and to succeed at something that's really difficult. I hope they learn that success is a long road full of curves and twists and failures, but that they can attain success with hard work. So thank you.